Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we are going to talk about Andrew Yang and how powerful of a parameter age has become in the 2020 U.S. presidential primary race, right? It's incredible how important it's become. All right, so specifically, I want to look at age and reflect back on how it is impacting Andrew Yang's run for the presidency, right? Andrew Yang's run for the presidency is happening now in 2020, and age has become a major issue. So, of course, I've talked in the past about how age is debilitating, right? So, basically the human body peaks physically between 20 and 30, right? The human body, the vast majority of mental acuity, right, and objects that are attached to our mental abilities, they usually peak at about 50. There's a very small number that peak at ages after that, but the majority of them peak up to the age of 50, right? So physical max physical performance happens between 20 and 30, and then max mental capacity usually happens between 30 and 50, right? And that's just science, right? We've talked about that, right? But today I want to talk about the struggles of Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders specifically, and to a lesser extent, Elizabeth Warren, the septuagenarian trinity, right? Three front runners who are all 70 plus, right? And I want to talk about where there are struggles far beyond the physical and mental debilitation that time brings humans, right? And debilitation has nothing to do with Bernie Sanders, Biden, Elizabeth Warren. It just has to do with humanity and time, right? All right, but there are other massive problems, right? And that problem is the chasm, the abyss, the huge chasm that spans between the culture and the society of the young and the old, right? And notice I left politics out of there, right? Because I'll tell you right now, and this is another reason why I'm talking about this, because it's just so important. At the macro level, the young, and I'm talking, 18 to 32, right? They do not care about politics at the macro level. 51% of them, they don't give two ferret tails for politics. They just do not care, right? There's certainly exceptions. There's powerful exceptions. Kai Watson, fantastic Yang commentator, really good, like incredibly young, and has huge potential, right? And he's leveraging that now, and he's going to continue to grow in ability, right? But the reality is, there is such a chasm between the culture and the society of the young and old, and this is a massive problem for Elizabeth Warren, for Joe Biden, and for Bernie Sanders. And the reality, one of the things that's really fascinating is how the three of them are managing. So let's talk about this chasm, right? So one of the reasons why, I'll tell you why. So one of the reasons I talk about the things that I talk about is that things resonate personally with me. When something resonates personally with me, I will speak about it, right? And one of the reasons why is I've learned, you learn with age, basically, yeah. What is the lesson that you learn with age? So the lesson that you learn with age is that when you move forward, right, and you cannot hand your understandings to anyone else, right? You can certainly teach your children, and we all do, massive dangers. You can say, hey, don't, never get in a car with a stranger. That's what I was recently talking to my younger kids about. Absolutely never, just reinforcing that, telling them stay away from recreational intoxications of any kind, just all these, and you reinforce these over time, and you continue to have those conversations. But subtle lessons, understandings, they cannot be handed to others. As humans, we only learn from personal celebration or personal pain, right? It's either a massive victory or a massive defeat that we owned. Other people's massive victories and massive defeats don't matter to people, right? Only our own, right? So I had a massive defeat recently, mentally, okay? And it was the okay boomer meme, right? Now, so I'll explain it to you, and then we're going to talk about how this connects to Biden and Warren and Sanders, right? and how it connects to Yang because of his youth, right? All right. So basically, OK Boomer came out. There's this meme. It was starting to grow. I was seeing it on Twitter. I was hearing about it on television. I was hearing about it on podcasts. I was hearing about it on YouTube. And I was like, I don't understand what this meme is, right? And I needed to understand it, right? So I tried, what was it? I tried a couple different methods to figure out what OK Boomer meant. And it failed, right? So at that point, I Googled, where do I get memes? And I literally typed it into my phone, and before I hit send, I just, my head fell, and I realized I was defeated. I was like, oh my gosh, because, my parents, my children's grandparents, they try so hard to relate to their grandchildren, right? And they're like, hey, are you playing that Pokemon game, right? And, so they're trying to be winsome and charming and saying, hey, I know you care about your Pokemon game, and I'm going to ask you about that thing, right? That wonderful, beautiful question, right? The child should hear, hey, child, I care about you and what you care about. But all they hear is the word Pokemon. And they're like, no, Grandma, it's not Pokemon. No, Grandma, it's not Pokemon. It's Pokemon, right? And there's this sharp correction, you don't get it, all right, and when I typed in, where do I get memes, and didn't even hit enter, I knew the chasm was there, and I could not cross the chasm, right? And I know this memes are a huge thing, and memes are incredibly important, and they are the very tip of the spear when it comes to this chasm, right? They are the abyss. Memes are and the reason why is one of the dividers for age is technology and language, right? And memes leverage both. They simultaneously leverage language and technology, right? So when I was thinking memes, I was thinking, oh, a meme is an image and it has some text underneath, right? That's 5-10 years gone, right? Memes really exist now, mostly on YouTube, as videos, right? And the way that young people get memes, the way my son and my daughter get memes, is they'll just put on YouTube, they'll sit down, and they have sources that have been culled, right? And they're given the best meme sources from their fellow young people, right? And they will watch these memes, and the memes they're very, very deep cut, right? So one of the things with memes is you can't just look at a meme once and understand it, right? Today's cutting edge memes are memes that are built on knowledge of the last 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months of memes. And so the funniest, most fresh, most moving memes for young people are only understood in the context of 6 days, 6 weeks, or 6 months of other memes. They deal with saturation. They deal with movement, right? They deal with language, right? It's incredible. And so me at the age of 49, right? I have a junior high son who's on the cutting edge of meme understanding, and I will watch him watch memes, and I will laugh at 1 in 10 because I don't understand the rest, right? But he's laughing at 4 out of 5, right? And there's just this chasm of understanding, right? And so Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, right, when they are trying to communicate to the young, it's darn near hopeless. It is hopeless, right? And the reason why is there are so many differences between the culture and the society of the old and the culture and the society of the young, right? And they cannot be merged. They cannot be merged, right? One of the things that's really shocked me, right? There's 10 years difference, a little more than 10 years difference between my oldest son and my youngest son, right? And both of them love video games, absolutely love video games, right? But there's a chasm between the two of them now, right? My older son does not like online shooters. It's almost everything my younger son plays. He plays Fortnite, he plays Apex Legends. He is very good and really enjoys online shooters, right? And it's really pretty incredible the difference, because my older son, he sounds like Joe Biden when he talks about Fortnite, right? He doesn't get it, right? He's like, there's no theme to this game, right? What is the point of the building in this game? This is complete nonsense. This game, why do you buy skins? Like, he just complains about it the way an old person would complain about something they don't understand or that they don't value, right? And that's just a decade's difference in video gaming, right? So the reality is, and Joe Biden is being cut the deepest on this, right? When Joe Biden opens his mouth, constantly he is gaffing, right? Mostly because, the things he is saying are appropriate for the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. But nothing he's saying is appropriate, almost nothing he's saying is appropriate for the 2000s or the 2010s, right? And that's because, this time, this era, right? The young celebrate what we feared. The young celebrate what the old feared. Perfect example is socialism, right? For Elizabeth Warren, for Bernie Sanders, for Joe Biden, right? They understand. They know what it means, right? They understood that there was a time when people hid underneath desks because they were worried that bombs would drop out of the sky, right? Practiced hiding under desks because they were worried that bombs would drop out of the sky because of the capitalism, communism, because of capitalism, socialism dichotomy, right? Socialism was absolutely feared in the 50s, the 60s, and a little bit in the 70s, right? And that started to change in the 80s, right? In the 80s, we're like, oh, we can defeat socialism. In the 90s, we did defeat socialism. In the 2000s, we began to forgive socialism. And in the 2010s, we are celebrating socialism. It is a massive change, right? So what one generation feared is celebrated by other generations, and not even the next generation, right? The boomers feared socialism. The millennials celebrate socialism, right? It is, and the abyss is massive. It is absolutely massive, And so, while the boomers remember the KGB, when they remember the breadlines in Soviet Russia, right? The millennials celebrate socialism. When the boomers look over at Venezuela and see it shattering into 1,000 pieces and understand that comes from a dedication to socialism, which has not served that nation in any way, right? And has destroyed virtually every government structure they've ever had, right? And has failed them over and over and over. The millennials celebrate that very same socialism, right? As boomers look over at China right now and say, oh my gosh, there are people who cannot worship the way they want, they cannot say what they want, they cannot write what they want, they cannot be what they want, they cannot love the way they want, they can't have the children they want to have. It is shocking, absolutely shocking to boomers, and they're like, this socialism is terrifying. Millennials celebrate socialism, right? As boomers look over at Cuba and say, this country has fallen into an economic malaise, right? And the brother of the person who ruled that nation for decades now rules it now in an eternal dynasty that has frozen them in time, where no innovation occurs, virtually no innovation occurs, and where people are just stuck in a time molasses, right? And they see no movement in Cuba and how this socialist government has not served them in any way. The millennials celebrate socialism. It is what generations back feared for the young is a point of celebration. And the chasm is so broad, right? I wanted to understand OK Boomer. I got there. It took me like 3 days to understand the OK Boomer meme, right? That's just a single meme, right? Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, they have no hope of speaking to the young. They cannot speak to the young, right? It's impossible. They don't understand their language. They don't understand their technology. And when they try, the slight problems are all the young here, right? So this age thing is massive. So where do we now? Let's circle this back around to Andrew Yang, right? Andrew Yang is 44. He stands right in the middle, right? And one of the things, and here's the thing, right? Our hope is not in Andrew Yang being able to speak to the young, right? Our future for winning is not the young. This is absolutely critical to understand, right? One of the reasons why we have a septuagenarian trinity, why we have the top 3 front runners being over 70 years old, is politics is an old person's game. Because the reality is you're never going to drag young people to forums and caucuses and debates and to just a long list of other words that are incredibly boring, right? But are incredibly exciting only to political wonks, right? It's just, and so this is really important that we understand this flow, right? But Andrew Yang, one of the things that he can do is he can avoid sounding ancient, right? Now, where do the 3, and he has a chance to understand the young. He has a chance to not be attached to the same fears that the older generations are attached to, right? And when you look at the septuagenarian trinity and you look at how they are navigating the problem of their age, and trust me, it is a huge problem, right? Far beyond the physical and mental debilitation that occurs with age, right? But the cultural and societal chasm that exists between them and the young, right? And a society that is actually perpetually and even more every single day desirous of the young, desirous of the desirous of the culture and what the young are pointing to, right? Desirous of the things that young people are celebrating, right? Basically, how are they walking through it, right? Well, Elizabeth Warren does the best by far, right? She's very quick, and I think her team has prepared her very well, not to engage the young on their own terms, but to avoid sounding ancient, right? Joe Biden's team has failed utterly in this. He sounds ancient when he opens his mouth, right? He sounds like he's walking out of an Archie comic, and not Riverdale, but an Archie comic, right? And it's horrendous, right? Now, Bernie Sanders is really, really fascinating. I used to wonder why he kept this curmudgeon shell on, right? What is the point of this curmudgeon shell? And now I'm realizing, right, Bernie Sanders is constantly frowning, constantly growling, constantly, railing, right? Because it's consistent, right? And it's beyond age, right? There are people who are curmudgeonly when they're young and curmudgeonly when they're old, right? So Bernie's lack of range gives him more space. That it means he never even attempts to communicate with the young, right? Bernie never really attempts to communicate with the young, right? Now, why are the young connecting with him? Well, Bernie Sanders did one thing interesting. You can't say right? But it's the socialism thing, right? Bernie Sanders was celebrating socialism when the entire world feared it, right? And now he's arrived at a day where it is celebrated, right? Here's the problem. Right now, Bernie Sanders is 78. Before the election, he will be 79. If he were ever elected, before his first year in office was done, he would be 80 years old. If Bernie Sanders were ever elected, he would spend the vast majority of his first term being 80 years old. Shockingly bad idea. Joe Rogan said it best. You do not take a flickering light on a long walk in the woods at night. And that is why our hope is Andrew Yang. The batteries are fresh. He illuminates the path before us. We need to take a flashlight that has brand new batteries in it into the night forest that will be 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024. It's important. All that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your opinion on the subject. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.